Okay, I think it is about time we start with our session. So, let me first introduce you guys to our speaker, Mr. Ashwini Chopra. Mr. Ashwini Chopra has over 27 years of experience. He's a partner at BAF Consultants. He has over 11 years of experience in estate and succession planning. He has worked with over 220 plus families all over the world. His educational background and his experience as a manager, a private banker, a trustee, and the head of a large family office puts him in a unique position to combine elements of management, law, and tax in offering estate and succession planning solutions to his clients. Uh, Let me introduce you guys to BAF Consultants and Swan Invest also, since a lot of you guys might not be knowing about it. So BAF Consultants is a cohesive team of professionals who deeply and passionately believe in the institution of family. They continuously research, experiment, and work in the area of human behavior in the context of family and closely knit teams. The core area of their work has two dimensions: strengthening awareness in individuals for understanding their own feelings and needs as well as those of others, and strengthening alignment between individuals by building their skill to find common ways to address their needs. Swan Invest, we endeavor to provide our clients with portfolio management services appropriate to their financial goals. Prior to structuring portfolios to avoid advisor bias, we clearly identify and communicate the risks involved in each investment. This approach has helped develop long-term trust with our clients and is a key reason for our clients sticking to us. About our background, this has resulted in our client base expanding to more than 4,000 happy customers and corporations. To sustain this trust, we constantly invest in enhancing product knowledge, build and retain an experienced team to help in retention of the trust we have, and also invest in technological tools to track and monitor investment portfolios. Today at the webinar, we'll be talking about estate planning. We'll be talking about what is the need of estate planning, and we'll be talking about why is today a very good time to think about the need of estate planning. It has always been, but today we'll be talking a little bit about that. So over to you, Ashwini ji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kunal, for a nice introduction. Warm welcome to everybody. Thanks for being here today, and thanks for taking out the time. Appreciate it pretty much. It shows your desire to know more about this. And so what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to spend the next 1 hour or so in yeah, so this is the what we are looking at. Why plan? Some myths and realities of estate planning, wills and trust, business succession, brief talk about business succession, things to avoid, and followed by Q&A. Given a expected breakup of time for in front of each item. So why plan? The first thing is, I think because of pandemic, a lot of people have had to face death in their family from up close quarters or friends, and that has put a lot of focus on this post-life planning, post-life procedures, etc. This has focused the mind. So about a month and a half back, I did a similar webinar, and we had over 200 participants in that, and that's again similar number I'm told Kunal is expecting over here. So the basic reason why planning, this is the pie chart. Now these percentages are my percentages, which is my experience. It may not pertain to everybody, but you can find what are the causes. So probate avoidance, asset protection, family governance, then business assets passing on, conflict avoidance, tax planning, privacy, liquidity planning. So all of these are very important factors, and each of them has their own requirement. I'll just touch on one or two. So for example, liquidity planning. In case a person dies, the assets, all the bank accounts are supposed to be frozen. Now, I know that a lot of you have joint accounts, so it's important that you actually plan out in such a way that in case you have joint accounts, you before giving death certificate, you should take out some amount of liquidity. Because once you give the death certificate, unless you have given a letter of succession or an indemnity, the banks will freeze the account, thereby making very little money available for day to day. If the person who's died as the main breadwinner or in whose name most assets are, then the issue is there. The other thing which I would like to touch on briefly over here is that everybody feels writing a will is estate planning. No, will is just one instrument of estate planning. Estate planning means looking at all your assets and consciously sitting down and saying not only what I want to give to whom after my life, but am I holding these in the right manner or not? Should these other names be included in the assets, or should I be making gifts of these assets to my next generation? What happens to my wife if she has no income of her own? Then what happens to her lifestyle? Will she be able to afford the lifestyle that she has been used to living with me? So all of these are part and parcel of estate planning. A will is just one of the instruments. Estate planning is more the thought. Execution of that thought is a will or a trust. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because a lot of verbosity is there and you can read through it, but estate planning basically begins with understanding family structure, asset holding pattern, and then what are the estate planning objectives. So on this topic itself, I've seen a lot of family spend a good amount of time on what are my objectives, what do I want to do. Then what are the structure to meet those objectives, and then implementation. So if you see only at the fourth stage is what the implementation, which is drafting a will or drafting a trust or drafting gift deeds, etc., comes into picture. Then who should be the executor? All of that is there. Estate planning and succession planning are inherently different. Succession planning is more to do with businesses and business owners, where you have to decide how will my business be governed. So it's not only transfer of shares to the next generation, but transfer of managerial rights, transfer of board rights, transfer of proxy rights as a shareholder. All of that makes a lot of difference, and a lot of discussion has to go into that. I'll cover some myths and realities quickly. And so the first myth, which is the most common I encounter, including in my own family, is about nomination. The general belief is that nominee becomes the owner after the death of the nominator. That is, after the death. If I have nominated somebody, if I die, my nominee becomes the owner. That's a myth. The reality is nominee is a possessor of asset. He does or she does not become owner of by default. Okay, so these are some of the important case laws and the legal position. Briefly, even if you are the nominee, you are stepping in the shoes of a trustee. So you are holding the assets or holding the money in trust to be distributed as per the will or as per the Succession Act. So if you are a Hindu Succession Act will apply, and that's how the assets will be distributed to the next generation. All of the beneficiary, all of the legal heirs will get an equal share. Okay. Another fact is, a myth is about joint ownership. It is believed that post-death joint ownership transfers ownership rights to the co-owner. For real estate, the law is very simple. The will and law or stroke law of each co-owner will determine succession. So if I and my wife, who are co-holders of a property, as per Succession Act, my share will be assumed to be 50% unless otherwise proven. And that 50% will devolve on my legal heirs as per my will or as per my the Succession Act. Let's assume I have not written a will, then I've got two children, so my two children and my wife and my mother, if she was alive, because I'm a Hindu, would inherit equal shares. So my 50% will be divided up into 4 parts. So, and my wife will become majority owner with 50% plus whatever she gets from me. I think it's about 7.5% or thereabout. So, oh, sorry, 12.5%. 12.5% she will get from my, so she'll become 62.5% owner. My son, daughter, mother will become 12.5, 12.5. Okay. If my mother has predeceased me, then only my children are the two co-holders along with my wife. So they will take 1/3 share each out of my share. With respect to others, the status of co-owner is again of a possessor like a nominee. So they are in the same position as a nominee, as a trustee of the money which they receive, and not the owners. Okay. So a lot of you may have a view about nomination, that under insurance, nomination done to a family member will trump whatever is written in the will. That is not so. I have gone through IDA, the Insurance Act, and it clearly says that unless otherwise provided, the nominee will be the shareholder or will be the owner of the assets. But that key things are unless otherwise provided. Okay. Another thing, myth is that succession law is the same for all individuals in India or all Indians. That is not so. The succession law is dependent on community, region, the manner, and person and place of marriage. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm a Hindu, I marry my wife who's a Hindu, and we go into the court to get married. We don't have a Saptapadi wedding, which is the 7 Feras. We don't have a Saptapadi wedding. In that case, the Hindu Succession Act does not apply to me or to my wife. It is Indian Succession Act which will apply. If, for example, I belong to Goa, J&K, or Pondicherry, or some other territories like Sikkim, then no Hindu law, Hindu Succession Act, Indian Succession Act, all of these don't apply. If you are in Goa, Portuguese law will apply. If you are in Sikkim, Sikkim has a separate law. Pondicherry, the French law will apply. So those are peculiarities born out of our historical, the way we became a republic. We first got independence and we became a republic after words when all the princely states joined the Indian Union. And one of the key things in that union, which was promised, was that the states will have the power to enact certain laws. So the Constitution of India gives certain rights to the states to enact certain laws. So Goa joined India in 1961, and Pondicherry also joined at similar time. So their laws continue to be the same because the state legislature has not enacted or not enforced the Indian Succession Act. Then another important fact which you need to remember now in destination weddings, if I am an Indian and I am on a long-term employment visa living in US, and I get married to a girl while we are both in US and the wedding takes place in US, then notwithstanding that we are both Indian citizens and we both come back to India, the US law will continue to apply. So these are certain peculiarities which you need to be aware about. And there was a recent case where the wife was who had filed for a divorce was told that you need to file for divorce in US. You can't pursue the case in India because the marriage took place in US. So that court has a jurisdiction. Myth 4, which actually used to be reality at some point of time before 2005, that post death of a co-partner, HUF property remains in HUF. I revert to my own family's example. My HUF, if it existed, would comprise of myself, my wife, my 2 children. Now, if I die, then my share, which is 1/3 share, not 1/4 share, because wife is a member and not a co-partner of HUF. So my 1/3 share will devolve on my children and my wife as per Succession Act or as per the provisions of my will. Okay, and even for HUF, different laws apply for different rules apply for Mitakshar and Dayabhag and for Aliya Santana and Marumakattayam. Okay, so these are 4 types of Hindu law recognized under Hindu Succession Act. So Mitakshar is what is followed in most of India. Dayabhag is followed in Assam, Bengal and Bihar, but not for Marwadis over there, not for North Indians settled there, the Bengalis or Odiyas or Assamese there. Similarly, if you go to Kerala or Tamil Nadu, then Aliya Santana and Marumakattayam respectively apply. These are both matriarchal laws, meaning HUF is there, but the HUF co-partnering is with the females and not with the males. The males are the members eligible for maintenance, but not eligible for co-partnering rights. Another thing which I've seen quite often, in fact, most often, is that will needs to be typed, written on stamp, legal paper, and registered. So one of the first things is written, typed and written. So will can be handwritten. It need not be typed. Also, if you have any serving family members, serving by serving, I mean serving on active duty in military or army, Navy or Air Force or paramilitary forces like Border Security Force, then they have the will can also be oral for them, with the provision that the will has to be written down as soon as they come back from combat zones. Okay, will can be written on a plain piece of paper. You can yourself write it. Very little legalese is required, as long as it is very clear and unambiguous. If you write a simple will, I, son of so and so, or wife of so and so, or daughter of so and so, out of my free will, do hereby state that I am dividing all my assets into equal parts to be given to all my legal heirs, okay, after my demise. That's a valid will. You don't need to do anything. Only 2 witnesses need to witness the will. Okay, again, the witnesses are witnessing your signatures to the will and not to the contents of the will. Witnesses need not know what is written in the contents of the will. Another thing which most people talk about, and I'll cover in detail later, but this first case law on the right side, Mathai Samuel versus Epan, another versus Epan and Epan. In this, the Supreme Court held in 2012 that any instrument by whatever name called and purporting to take into effect anything, if it purports to take into effect after the demise of a person, whether in full or in part, to the extent of what is written for devolving after the demise, it is that particular instrument is a will. Simply put, I'm sorry, I revert to my legalese, but simply put, if you write a family settlement, a portion of which is taking effect today and a portion of which is taking into effect after your death, then the portion which has to take into effect after your death will be called a will, okay, and not a family settlement. Okay, and to that extent, it will have to go through the probate court. Another myth about wills, there are complex post-death procedures, and anyone can challenge the will. Well, I think we can all thank newspapers for this, because only the wills which are challenged make the news. Okay. If I've been noticing, I've been in this industry for 11 years. For the past 5 years, I've been tracking what are the number of wills which are challenged across the high courts. Okay, and across India, so big a population, I rarely find more than 100 wills across India are challenged. Okay, so that's the status. So I don't think a will is challenged so often as it is made out to be, but whenever it is challenged, it makes news. Okay, so which means that if it was not making news, that means that a lot of wills are challenged. So only things which are queer or which are out of the ordinary make news. So you should look at it from that perspective. The Indian Succession Act is a very well laid out law with well-defined procedures with how to settle the assets post the life of a person. Okay, and it's not that everybody can challenge, only people who have an interest in the will can challenge. For example, if I write a will and I don't leave anything for my son, then my son may challenge the will because he is a legal heir. But my brother can't come and challenge the will if any of my class 1 heirs being my mother, my wife, and my children. If any of the class 1 heirs are alive, then my brother or my father, both being class 2 heirs, can't challenge the will. Okay. I'll skip this. I understand the topic is more on will, but trust, a lot of people feel binds, takes away my control, beneficiary will be at the mercy of trustees. Well, no, I've been writing trustee. I would have written over 500 trusts by now. And trusts can be made as flexible as you want with as little or as much control as you want. And Trust Act is a very flexible act which gives you the power to write your own succession law. Okay. All kinds of protections can be built in for beneficiaries. For example, I have used one office of a protector, or in the trust deed, I've given the power to the beneficiaries if to act by majority and remove the trustees. So all these powers can be built in. The document has to be prepared carefully because a trust deed once written, you can rarely change it. There are very big complications on changing a trust deed. The important case laws about this where a trust was a lot to be changed are given on the right side. Okay, the myth is all trusts provide estate duty and asset protection. Estate duty is not there in India right now. Though there are talks and expectation that estate duty might come into India. Till 1985, there used to be an estate duty in India, which was repealed in 1985. And the top rate of estate duty at that point of time was 85%. The bottom rate was 35%. Asset protection is a new thing which has come in about 5-6 years back. This is and has gained prevalence in the last couple of years after the insolvency and bankruptcy code has been made tighter in 2019. Lalit Kumar Jain versus Union of India was a landmark case in this in the Supreme Court. Over here, if you have borrowed funds from banks or any other person and you have given personal guarantees, that then the creditor has the option to go either after you or after the corporate borrower or after both. It's up to them. And in which case the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code provides very little assets to be left with the guarantor. The amount of wealth is in urban areas, house worth 20 lakh rupees, money and bank balances worth 1 lakh rupees, jewelry were within limits. The only exception over there is unencumbered insurance policies. Okay, So a lot of business families have started settling asset protection trust to protect or build a family fund, which is protected from personal liabilities. Okay, but this has to be done in a specific manner and carefully considering what has been done earlier and what is possible to be done given the contract signed with bankers or borrowers, sorry, or the lenders. Moving to the next portion, which is wills and trusts. Kunal, I hope we are good on time.
Yes, Ashwini ji.
So a will, as defined by the Indian Succession Act, the only act which defines what is the will is Indian Succession Act. It says a legal intention of a testator with respect to his property, which he desires to be carried into effect after his death. Now, this is, each word of this has got a very big meaning. So just an intention of the testator with respect to his property is not enough. It has to be a legal intention. What makes it a legal intention? When you reduce that intention to writing and properly witness it, as per the Indian Evidence Act. With respect to his property, okay, now property has a wider meaning over here. Property does not mean only real estate, it means movable property. It means claims, rights, and if there are lawsuits going on, the assignment of any benefits arising out of those lawsuits. So all of this is comprising property. In recent times, your brand value, your trademarks, copyrights, etc. Have also been part of property. A lot of celebrities, like one of the most famous cases is Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's image rights are copyrighted, and those copyrights are held by a family trust. Okay, so that copyright of image is also a property. Your digital footprints across Instagram, across Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. are also property. Okay. So then a legal intention of a testator with respect to the property, not only any property, but that property which he desires to be carried out after his death. So if I say that I am giving you so and so 1 lakh rupees today, that is not a will. It has to be any item which is after the demise. So all of these words have a meaning, and on each of these words there is a separate case law of Supreme Court. Okay. I'm not going back into the details of each case law, but suffice to say that each of them has been sufficiently debated. Okay, Section 62 of Indian Succession Act provides that a will can be altered, revoked by the maker at any time when he is competent to dispose of his property by will. So generally speaking, if you have a capacity to contract, which means that you are of right mind, then you can dispose of your property by will. There have been cases, and it is written in the Succession Act, that any person who is otherwise not of good mental health, but has intermittent bouts when he's of mental health, has good mental health, can, in the presence of proper persons, that is doctor, attending doctor, also write or amend a will. Okay. So the modes of revocation, alteration are mentioned, and these are given. Okay. In case of marriage of a Parsi or Christian, the will automatically stands revoked. However, for Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, it does not get revoked automatically. And this is one of the major mistakes which a lot of people do by not including their wives into their wills. And if the wives die or there is a marital separation, then rewriting the will. Both have to be done. The moment there is a life, these are called life events. So the moment there is a life event, birth of a child, death of a family member, the will has to be re-examined. Okay, it's a best practice. It is not something required under law. These are advantages of a will. Read through. I will not bore you with my voice reading this through. This presentation is freely available with Swan, and they can share it with you. I have no problem with that. Okay. These are limitations. Limitations to my mind are more important for you to understand what. So one, it does not provide bankruptcy remoteness. As I was talking about asset protection, so asset protection is not given. In fact, when you write a will, the first provision of a will is that my liabilities have to be settled. The Indian Succession Act clearly says that the liabilities of a deceased have to be settled first. Earlier in the Hindu Succession Act, it was the moral obligation of the sons of the deceased to settle his or her liabilities. Now that has been amended and the moral obligation has been taken away. So under Hindu Succession Act also, it is the estate of the deceased which is liable for the settling the liabilities. If after settlement of liabilities anything is left, that is to be distributed among the legal heirs. Okay. Then though it doesn't provide estate duty protection, it doesn't provide protection against forced heirship. Forced heirship is something where the share of each individual is defined under law and the will cannot alter that. This is applicable in India under Goan law, under Pondicherry law, and under Chandranagar and some other similar territories. Okay. So if you are going and living, change your domicile. I'm not sure if you know domicile. So domicile is, if I'll give you an example of a change of domicile. I was born and brought up in Delhi. I shifted to Bombay in 2000. And after that, I've been living in Bombay, but I never changed my income tax, and everything remained in Delhi only. So when about 2010, after living 10 years, I changed my income tax, I changed my voter ID card, and I went to the Bombay Municipal Corporation and obtained something called a domicile certificate. That changed my domicile. Now, if I were to do that same thing in Goa, then my domicile became Goa, and then the Goan law will apply of inheritance and not the Indian Succession Act or the Hindu Succession Act. Will can be contested under certain circumstances. For Muslims, I don't know if there are any Muslims in the audience, but for Muslims, they can bequeath only 1/3 of their estate, and that too with restrictions. Okay. So this is something of a post-life procedure. Again, a read through, but more importantly, I will cover the last bullet, which is that a probate is mandatory under Indian Succession Act for Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, and Buddhists who are ordinarily domiciled. That's the word again, domicile, and resident. Okay, again, we have had in my circles, we have had a long debate about what does domiciled and resident mean. So it is not sufficient for me to be domiciled over here in Bombay. At the time of my death, I also have to be resident in Bombay. Okay, only then this would apply. So both have to apply. It is domiciled and resident, it's not domiciled or resident. Inside the jurisdictions of high courts of Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai. For persons outside these jurisdictions, if they hold immovable property in these jurisdictions, which is high courts of Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai. So if you were a person living in Delhi, but hold a property in Bombay, then under Indian Succession Act, a probate is mandatory. I'll give you a personal example because my mother died last year and how it happened with her post-life procedures, and that will give you an idea. So she was living in Delhi. She was domiciled, resident in everything in Delhi. And we had a will in place. Knowing my profession, I would have obviously got her to write a will. So I had a will. But in Delhi, I knew that if I went for a probate, then the probate cost would be 4% of the assets, which was pretty expensive to my mind. So what we did was we did a deed of renunciation. All of us siblings, we are 3 siblings, we did a deed of renunciation and we applied for letter of succession. We said we don't have a will. We have no will in place for my mother, and we applied for a letter of succession. The letter of succession was with very little assets, and so we saved quite a lot of money on the probate application. I can give you this much, that when we were looking to sell the house where my mother and father are living. So when we went to sell the house, the registrar said you have to bring in either a probate order or a letter of succession before I allow you to sell the house. So notwithstanding that we had a will in place, we had every right to be, we put a deed of relinquishment, the sale would not go through the registrar unless we had a letter of succession. So now this registrar, so one of my friends works for Delhi government, so the registrar was a friend. So I got talking to him and I said, okay, what would you have done? Because it's under law, not mandatory. So what he said was, while it is not mandatory, if you were not selling, so if we had not been selling the house and we had only transferred the house to my father's name, then, or all of our names, then the probate is not mandatory. But the moment we want to sell the house to give a clear title to the house, a letter of succession or a probate is mandatory. And if we don't do that, if the registrar doesn't obtain that, then the title is not clear and can be challenged at any point of time. The sale can be challenged. So while in law, the probate is not mandatory, letter of succession is not mandatory, practical scenario is that it becomes mandatory due to other intersection with other laws. Okay, letter of administration is an alternative to probate in case an executor is not appointed or doesn't exist at the time of probate application, or is unwilling or incapable of acting. Then the legal heirs can get together and apply to the court for a letter of administration. This is almost equal to letter of succession, but under the letter of administration, an administrator will be appointed to deal with the estate of the deceased and distribute it. Swan is giving you an ebook which covers this a little more in detail, and you can go through them, and you can trouble Pramod and Kunal with more knowledge about this.
Yes. The ebook and the presentation will be shared by the weekend or to all the participants over the emails which you guys provided on the registration link.
Okay, a succession certificate is another animal under the Indian Succession Act. Succession certificate applies or is given by the civil court to the legal heirs only in 2 cases. One, to realize the debts of the individual who is deceased, or the person when there is only movable assets. So if there are only fixed deposits, securities, shares, bonds, etc., then you can apply for a succession certificate. In case there is any property then either letter of succession, letter of administration, or probate, those become mandatory. So this is a very thing. So this also throws a planning opportunity for you to gift your house to your, if you are living in a place where like in Bombay, gifting of a house from father to son costs only 2,000 rupees stamp duty. So you can take advantage of that and transfer the house to your son, and then only succession certificate needs to be applied for, and not letter of succession or probate certificate. Okay, and I think that's sufficient about this succession certificate. Okay, again, another thing is realize the debts, which has two meanings. One is realize the debts due from the deceased and to the deceased. If the deceased has lent money, that also is a movable asset and can be covered under a succession certificate. Or if he has borrowed money against, the creditor has a right in that case to apply for succession certificate. Okay. The last line is important. A succession certificate cannot be granted if LOR, letter of administration, or probate is required under section 212 or 213. A brief about trust, just as the title said of the presentation, will, wasiyat, and beyond. So this is the beyond part. Okay. Legal obligation. Trust is a very simple thing. It is not a legal entity. It's a legal obligation cast on trustees. So the difference is that a trust cannot be, let's say, a shareholder of a company. The trustees are the shareholder in their capacity as trustees. It is the same thing as a karta of an HUF. When you hold shares as a karta, it is written Ashwini Chopra, karta of so-and-so HUF. Similarly, Ashwini Chopra, trustee of so-and-so trust, is written when, if it was a company which was holding the shares of another company, then the company's name is entered as a registered shareholder, because company is a legal person. Trust is not a legal person. It's an obligation. There are three essentials of a trust: obligation, which is the object of the trust, subject of the trust, and the trust property. So all three have to be there to make a valid trust. So, and the fourth item which I may add over here is intention. If a person has settled a trust but had no intention to settle a trust, then the trust can be held to be a sham trust or a improperly settled trust, and it can be set aside by the courts. To understand trust better, I give the example of a Roman word called dominium. The Latin word dominium means ownership, which is perfect and complete ownership. It comprises of three parts: right to use, right to enjoy, and right to dispose. If, for example, I write in my will that I hereby bequeath the house number so-and-so, situated at so-and-so place, to my two children, to my wife for life, and after her demise to my two children equally. I have, by this wordings, I have created a trust. Because my wife cannot sell the house, she has only a right to stay in the house. My children cannot sell the house till the time my wife is alive, because they are merely trustees. So the title will get transferred to my children, but they can't sell the house. Okay. So I have taken away the right to dispose from them by giving the right to enjoy the house to my wife. I have taken away the right to freely dispose the house from my children, and that has created a trust. So when any of these rights is taken away, then trust is created. This is exactly what I said: three certainties: intention, object, subject matter. The like three certainties, there are three uncertainties, and these you should guard out for. One is semantic, conceptual, or linguistics uncertainty, which means that you are never clear that you wanted to settle a trust. Your intention was not clear, or the trust deed is drafted in such a manner that so I came across a trust deed, and this is a good example where the settlor is the main trustee, and there is another trustee, but the other trustee has practically zero powers to act during the life of this settlor. And the settlor is also the primary beneficiary. Okay, so this is a sham trust. This trust will be immediately set aside, saying that the settlor never wanted to create a trust. Then evidential uncertainty. You may have settled a proper trust, but if you are doing all the, you are keeping and controlling all the trust assets from your own, for your own good, then again the evidential uncertainty exists. There is no evidence that you created a trust. Okay. And administrative, that there are no documents, there are nothing to prove that a trust actually exists, or your administration of the trust is completely in your hands. So which means the trust never got created. I'll skip this. This is more of read through. There are two types of trust: revocable versus irrevocable. Revocable, settlor has the right to revoke the trust. Irrevocable trust, settlor does not have the right to revoke the trust or assume any power directly or indirectly over the income or assets of the trust. A discretionary trust, on the other hand, is a trust where, so let's say determinate trust is, so let's say I set up a trust and I say 50% of the assets belong to my daughter, 50% to my son. It's a determinate trust. Okay, but if I put together a trust where I say the trustees are free to decide in what proportion they want to distribute the assets to my two children, that's a discretionary trust. Now I can create hybrid trust also, wherein I say that for the next 50 years, whatever income is generated by the trust will be shared equally by my daughter and my son, but at the end of 50 years, the manner in which the assets will be divided will be up to the trustees to decide, or vice versa. In such a case, I've created a partially discretionary trust. A brief about 2 minutes on business succession planning. Businesses, as I call them, are babies which never grow up. Okay. So it's as if a businessman or an entrepreneur has given birth to another child, and that child is never going to grow up. It is always going to demand attention. It is always going to demand growth or nurture. And if nurtured properly, if the plant is watered properly, then it will continue bearing fruit over generations to come. So obviously it requires a different mindset and different thinking from writing wills or doing estate planning. So these are the 4 dimensions. When you are running a business, you have to plan for who will run the board of the company, who will run the company, who will be the MD, who will be the CEO, how will the CFO be selected, how will key managerial persons be selected, what are the rights of owners versus rights of board members. For example, if I setting up I'm assisting a family where one member is not going to be in the management of the company. He or she is not going to be, is going to be owner of the company. Now, as a manager, you can draw on remuneration, salaries, etc. You can bill your expenses to the business, which are legitimate in nature. But so you don't have a burning need to declare dividends or distribute profits. But for a person who's just an owner and not a manager, they are not drawing in the remuneration. So what happens to their right? That has to be planned out. Then financial, what are the cash flows will be required? Does the business need more funds? How will it grow? Will we dilute equity? Who will have the voting power to dilute equity? All of these need to be planned for, including family and emotional. So only when you do all of this, your succession planning, business succession planning is complete. Last bit, things to avoid. Unidimensional planning, side tracking, which is basically structuring successfully, but hijacking the agenda, and ignoring emotional states and psychological overlays. This last bit is the most important. If I know, or let me actually give it from our mythology, if Dhritarashtra knew the kind of person Duryodhana is, was it right for him to even desire the throne for Duryodhana? Wasn't it incumbent on him to think what will happen? Okay, or going back forward further, was it right for Bhishma to Devvrat to take such a Bhishma Pratigya about not marrying and not having children ever, a life of celibacy, when he was clearly the most capable and could have given rise to progeny who were more capable? He basically cut off that bloodline, and his presence cast a long shadow on the empire. So all of these things go on every day in our households. We need to recognize that if two brothers don't get along well, they have no common interest, it is better to give them, partition them, make them live harmoniously and amicably, rather than putting them together in a one bucket. This is especially true of people who run businesses rather than professionals and salaried class people. But also hold truths for professionals and salaried class people, because if then you should not give a joint ownership of any asset to your children. As far as possible, give them individual ownership. Thank you, and we're open for questions.
Thank you so much, Ashwini ji. I think this was one of estate planning is a very devil topic for a lot of people in the world, but you summarized it in a very, very uniform way, and in a way that we could understand it very easily. Thank you so much for that. Ashwini ji is open for questions for 20 minutes. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and I'll ask you guys to unmute yourself.
एंड संगीता जी, सॉरी, मैंने आपका मैसेज अभी देखा है हिंदी में, मेरे को बहुत मुश्किल होता है ये बोलना, तो आई एम मोर कन्वर्सेंट इन इंग्लिश, तो सॉरी अबाउट दैट.
So if anyone wants to ask any questions, please raise your hands. Okay. Are you speaking something, Randa ji? Okay, so I'm receiving some questions on my WhatsApp. I think some people are having trouble turning on their mics over here. So let me ask a question from Miss Nikki. Ashwini ji, Nikki is asking if having a will is important when you are 25 years old.
इसको प्रॉपर होल्ड कर देना, वो कॉन्सेप्ट की गिर रही है.
Hold on.
I am sorry, I'll give you a morbid example, but so I'm apologizing in advance. So I had a good friend. He was running a private equity fund about this was about 2011, and I was just setting up the trustee business for ICICI. So I went to him and I said, "Listen, Ved, uh, I think you've got enough good amount of wealth. Why don't you write a will?" And he laughed it off, saying that, "Listen, इतना wealth तो नहीं है and इतना जरूरी भी नहीं है कि मैं will लिखूं, अभी कुछ है नहीं and देखेंगे जब होगा तो." And things went over there and I did not press the issue, being a friend. As it happened, within 6 months, that individual died in a very freak accident. Okay, a coconut fell on his head, and you can read about it about Ved Prakasharya. And he just could not predict, and his wife had to struggle a lot in basically understanding what he has done, what he had put together, and how to monetize it. So, काफी problem हुआ. So I tell everybody that will लिखने का उम्र नहीं होता. If you have assets, write a will. Okay, if you have insurance, if you have planned something, write a will. It just gives clarity. Okay. Another example, without name, certain individual from an ultra large family in Bombay died. He was about 30 years of age. He left behind a child and a widow. Now the widow was getting remarried, and obviously she should. Her life should not stop. That's my personal view, but her life should not stop. Now the child's custody was being fought over, and obviously there was no will. So whatever shares were held in the business empire by that individual passed on to the child who was under the custody of the wife. This was not liked by the family. And ultimately, so the case went on for about 15 years. And ultimately, then we wrote a trust deed for them. And they agreed on a compromise in the court that the shares will be held in a trust for the benefit of the daughter, and that the trustees would be one person from the family of the husband and one person nominated by the wife, but acceptable to the family of the husband. So you have to think about what is your life situation and do accordingly. Age has no relation to it.
Thank you for answering that, Ashwini ji. I have another question from Mr. Gaurav. He is asking that his child is in USA. So can he write a will which will pertain to the rules of India or of USA?
So I need to have more details about his life, but broadly speaking, I would advise him to, if he has gone on a long-term visa, or let's say H-1B visa, but is not a green card holder or a US citizen, then he can write two wills, one for his India assets, one for his US assets. If he has become a green card holder or a US citizen, then as per US law, only the US will is valid, and he has to write only a will in the US and obtain probate first in US and then in India.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Does anyone wants to ask any other questions? Please raise your hand if you want to ask any other question. I think the presentation was informative enough that a lot of people don't have any extra questions, or maybe the details were enough for people. But
I did not do a good job, so whichever way, so that's okay.
I would strongly disagree to that, sir. Okay, Mr. Arun has a question. I'll ask Mr. Arun to unmute himself.
I just wanted to ask, is there any limit to the number of wills that can be changed?
No, There's no limit.
No limit. Okay, thank you. And thank you because very informative chat.
Yeah.
Dr.
Since you have asked this, one additional point I would like to bring, which I think I should have covered, but I did not cover. The registration of a will is also not mandatory. Okay, it's under Indian Registration Act 1908. It's a optionally registrable document, and an unregistered will overrides a registered will which was dated earlier. So if I wrote a will in March 2020 and today I write an unregistered will, okay, my unregistered will overrule the registered will. The only benefit of a registered will is that there's a government servant who comes and vouches for the authenticity of the document. And even if you lose the will, the registration department will give you a copy of the will, true copy of the will. So there are advantages to a registration, but it is not mandatory. Sorry about missing that out.
What is the registration charges of the will?
See, it's a state to state item, but typically it varies from 500 rupees to 3,000 rupees.
It is not on the value of the.
No, it is not on the value.
Okay, thank you.
I hope your questions are answered, Mr. Arun.
Since you're from Indore, most of the people I believe are in MP. It would be around about 2,000 rupees is what my, not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much. Would anyone else would like to ask a question to Mr. Ashwini? Okay, I think we have had a lot of questions and a very detailed and a very interesting webinar. I hope everyone would have learned something new and something they can integrate into their lives. Wealth planning and estate planning is a very basic part of our lives. So I really hope that everyone now has a basic knowledge of what goes on into estate and succession planning. So this was Will, Vasiyat and Beyond by Mr. Ashwini Chopra. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. Please spare 2 minutes of your valuable time to fill in the feedback form shared in the chat box. We would really appreciate if you guys can give us some feedback. I think Ashwini ji, one feedback which I received from a lot of people was a little bit of Hindi would have helped, but maybe we can incorporate it next time.
Yeah, you should have told me earlier, then I would have prepared, because then I have to write certain things down to.
So I think this is a learning for our next webinar, and I really hope that everyone joins the next webinar too. For any questions, doubts and queries pertaining to today's session, please drop a mail to ashwini@bafconsultants.com. The email IDs are in the chat box, so you can copy it. And to find more interesting videos, articles, blogs and other content, we recommend you to go through our website and social media handles of Swan and BAF Consultants, linked in the chat box below. So this was Will, Vasiyat and Beyond and Mr. Ashwini Chopra on a brief about estate planning for us in India. Thank you so much for attending, and we will be sharing a presentation and ebook and also answering your questions if you guys can mail us your questions. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much, Ashwini ji. This was a really lovely session. I really appreciate you taking out some of your time from your busy Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining.